My boss fired me after 17 years of sacrificing for the company to employ his niece. He forgot I didn't sign the non-compete agreement. I left, started my own business, and took their biggest clients who were loyal to me. He came back begging, but what happened next was unexpected. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. We are on a journey to our first 1,000 subscribers. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I had given 17 years of my life to that company, 17 long years of early mornings and late nights, of missed family dinners and canceled vacations, of pouring every ounce of myself into building something I thought would last. My name was Thomas, and until a few weeks ago, I was the operations manager at a mid-sized logistics firm that prided itself on family values and loyalty to our own. The irony of those slogans didn't escape me, not anymore. I had been there since I was 25, starting as an intern who never took no for an answer. I learned every system, memorized every protocol, and made myself indispensable. Or at least, I thought I had. In those first years, I didn't mind the 12-hour days or the endless calls at night. Back then, I felt alive, like I was part of something bigger. My wife, Carla, would sometimes complain that she barely saw me, but I always assured her, "Just a little longer, honey. We're building a future." She trusted me, and I trusted the company. It was a Tuesday morning when I first noticed something was off. The boss's niece, Emily, had started showing up at the office a few weeks prior, fresh out of college and brimming with bright ideas she liked to share loudly in every meeting. She was charming, sure, but I could tell she didn't understand the business. She didn't even try. She'd prattle on about streamlining workflows and modernizing logistics, but the truth was she didn't know the difference between a shipment manifest and a grocery list. Still, I kept my thoughts to myself, because that's what you did in a company like ours. You swallowed your pride and kept the peace. That morning, Emily was in my office again, perched on the edge of my desk, pretending to be interested in the quarterly numbers I was poring over. "Uncle says we need to start thinking bigger," she said, tapping her pen on my desk like she owned it. "He wants me to shadow you, get a feel for how things run." My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. "Of course. Happy to show you the ropes." She beamed at me, her confidence radiating in that way only someone who'd never been told no could muster. "Great. I'm a quick learner," she said, as if that would undo the years I'd spent sweating over those numbers she now found so boring. As the days wore on, she was everywhere, hovering behind me in meetings, asking redundant questions I'd already answered, and smiling at the clients who dropped by the office. She was harmless, or so I told myself. But deep down, something gnawed at me. I began to notice little things. Emily in hushed conversations with her uncle, quick glances in my direction that turned into forced smiles when I caught her. I told Carla about it one night over dinner, my first dinner at home in weeks, and she just shook her head. "You've always been too loyal, Thomas," she said. "Don't let them take advantage of you." I wanted to believe I was imagining it all. After all, hadn't I earned my place there? Hadn't I given them everything? But late at night, alone in my office, I would stare out the window at the city lights and feel something shift inside me. A slow, creeping dread. A sense that the ground was moving under my feet, and no matter how hard I worked, I wouldn't be able to hold on. The next day, Emily showed up with a thick binder, new workflows, new policies, all courtesy of her fresh perspective and her uncle's blessing. She slapped it on my desk and said, "Uncle wants your feedback on this by tomorrow." Her tone was breezy, but I could hear the edge in it. The message was clear: play along or get out of the way. I flipped through the binder that night in my living room, the pages filled with buzzwords and half-baked strategies. My stomach churned as I realized just how little my opinion seemed to matter anymore. I thought about all the times I'd been the one to save a client's account, the times I'd stayed up until dawn fixing someone else's mistake because I believed in the work. It all felt so far away now, like a story I'd told myself to keep going. Still, I wasn't ready to give up. I told myself it was just a phase. Emily would get bored and move on. I would keep my head down and let my work speak for itself. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake Carla's words. Maybe I had been too loyal. Maybe it was time to see where that loyalty had really gotten me. And so, with a tight smile and a forced calm, I prepared for what came next. Because somewhere deep down, I could already sense that everything I had built was about to be ripped away, and that I would have to decide how to fight back. The day it all fell apart started like any other. Coffee at dawn, the weight of my briefcase heavier than usual, and Emily's overly bright smile greeting me at the door. I tried to ignore the cold dread in my stomach, telling myself I was just being paranoid. After all, I'd survived mergers, staff cuts, and economic downturns. I could handle one overzealous niece. But as soon as I stepped into my office, something was different. My inbox was flooded with calendar invites from HR, and my gut twisted tighter with every ping. Emily was there, of course, perched on the corner of my desk like she'd been born to take up that space. "Uncle wants to see you in the conference room at 10, she said, her voice all sweet sugar, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. "He said it's important." I knew then, before I even walked into that room, that this wasn't a discussion. This was a decision, and I wasn't part of it. The conference room was cold, the air too still. My boss, Richard, sat at the head of the table, his hands folded, his expression carefully blank. Next to him was that HR manager, Mark, who never looked anyone in the eye if he could help it. Emily sat a few seats down, tapping her pen against her notepad with an excitement she tried to hide. I took a breath and sat down, feeling my pulse drum in my ears. "Thomas," Richard began, his voice calm and practiced, "I want to thank you for everything you've done for this company. Your years of dedication haven't gone unnoticed." I clenched my teeth to keep from saying something I'd regret. My heart was pounding, my hands cold. "What's going on, Richard?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. He sighed. "The way you do when you're pretending to be sorry." "We're restructuring," he said, as if that explained everything. "New leadership, new vision. Emily's stepping up to take a more active role, and we think it's time for you to move on." Move on. 2 words to erase 17 years. I stared at him, trying to process. My mind was racing. Images of late nights, of client calls at midnight, of the holidays I'd spent in the office so we wouldn't lose a shipment. I had given everything, and this was how they repaid me. "You're firing me?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard cleared his throat. "We'd like to think of it as a mutual decision. A chance for you to find something that aligns better with your future goals." Emily shifted in her seat, her pen tapping faster. I could feel her watching me, waiting to see how I'd react. My hands were shaking under the table. I wanted to stand up and scream at them, tell them exactly what I thought of their so-called family values, but I couldn't. My throat was too tight. "I see," I said finally. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me there to smile politely. "And what about my severance? My benefits?" Mark cleared his throat. "We'll make sure everything is processed promptly. You'll receive your final paycheck by the end of the week." He wouldn't meet my eyes, the coward. I looked at Richard one last time, searching his face for even a flicker of regret. But there was nothing, just that same calm mask he wore in every meeting. 17 years, I said quietly. "I built this place with you." He looked down at the table. "I know, Thomas. But things change. Things change. Just like that." I didn't say another word. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out of that room without looking back. My legs felt like they might give out, but I kept moving. As I passed Emily in the doorway, she reached out a hand, like she expected me to shake it. I brushed past her, and for the first time in years, I didn't care what anyone thought. I went back to my office and shut the door behind me. I stared at the photos on my desk. Me and Carla at the company holiday party, the kids on their first day of school, the plaque they gave me after 10 years of service. My hands trembled as I packed them away, each picture a reminder of the life I'd traded for a job that never really saw me. Carla was waiting for me when I got home, her face pale as she opened the door. "What happened?" she asked, her voice breaking. I sank into her arms, the words tumbling out in a rush. Everything I'd been too proud to admit, everything I'd been too scared to say. "They replaced me with her," I said, choking back the tears. 17 years, Carla. 17 years for nothing." She held me tight, her fingers running through my hair. "Not for nothing," She whispered fiercely. You gave them your best, Thomas. That's not nothing. But now it's time to take it back. All of it. I pulled back, wiping my eyes. She was right. I could feel it in my bones. They thought they'd broken me, but they didn't know me at all. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And as I sat there in the quiet of our living room, the weight of betrayal heavy on my chest, a new idea began to take shape. I remembered something that made my heart pound with possibility. I had never signed that non-compete agreement. They'd asked, but I'd hesitated, and they'd never followed up. A small oversight, a single line in a contract that no one cared about until now. Until it meant I could walk away with everything I built and make it mine. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind was a storm of plans and half-formed dreams. I had been loyal. I had been patient. And now, for the first time in years, I was ready to be something else. I was ready to be free. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, the weight of everything that had happened pressing against my chest like a boulder. But there was something else there too. A flicker of determination, a quiet voice in my head whispering that maybe this was the chance I didn't know I needed. I sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours before, staring out the window as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and blues. Carla joined me after a while, her hair tousled from sleep, her eyes searching mine. You didn't sleep, did you? She asked, worry etched into the lines of her face. I couldn't, I admitted, my voice hoarse. I kept thinking about everything, about how they thought they could just push me out like I didn't matter. She reached across the table, her fingers curling around mine. You matter, Thomas, more than they ever deserved. I looked at her, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I never signed the non-compete, I said quietly, testing the words out loud. They always assumed I had, but I didn't. I checked last night. There's no signature, no file with my name on it. Her eyes widened. So you're free. You could start your own company. The idea had been circling in my mind since that cold conference room, like a moth to a flame. At first, it felt like wishful thinking, a fantasy I didn't have the strength to make real. But now, with Carla looking at me like she believed in me more than I believed in myself, it didn't feel so impossible. I know those clients, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I built those relationships, not Richard, not Emily. Me. They trusted me because I always took care of them, because I treated them like people, not numbers. Carla squeezed my hand, her eyes shining. Then call them, Thomas. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you're planning. I hesitated, the weight of doubt pressing at the edges of my thoughts. What if they don't come with me? What if I'm just chasing something that doesn't exist? She shook her head, her voice firm. You gave them everything. They know that. If they're worth having, they'll follow you. So that day, with nothing left to lose, I picked up the phone and started dialing. My hand shook as I punched in those familiar numbers, the ones I'd known by heart for years. I started with Ron Jacobs, one of our biggest accounts. I'd saved his business more times than I could count, late-night freight emergencies, customs nightmares, you name it. Thomas. Ron's voice boomed in my ear like an old friend. I heard the news. What the hell happened? I swallowed, my throat dry. They let me go, Ron. Brought in the boss's niece to replace me. Silence for a moment, then a low curse. That's a damn shame, Thomas. You're the reason we stuck around all these years. I closed my eyes, relief flooding through me. I'm thinking of starting my own logistics company, I said. No big corporate nonsense, just me, doing what I've always done. Taking care of my clients. There was another pause, then he let out a low whistle. You do that, and I'm with you, he said. No hesitation. One call turned into 2, then 3. By the end of the day, I'd spoken to nearly a dozen clients. Each conversation another crack in the wall of doubt I'd built around myself. Some hesitated, sure, but most didn't. They knew me. They knew what I stood for. And more than that, they were tired of being treated like they were just another line on a spreadsheet. I didn't tell Carla everything that night. Some part of me was still afraid to say it out loud, like it might vanish if I did. But she could see it in my eyes when I walked through the door. How did it go? She asked, her voice soft. I just smiled. Better than I hoped. We spent the evening at the kitchen table, sketching out ideas on the back of an old envelope, names for the new company, potential clients, the steps I'd need to take to make it real. Every time I felt the fear creeping in, Carla's hand would find mine, steady and sure. "You've already done the hard part," she said. "The rest is just details." That night, lying in bed with her breathing steady beside me, I stared up at the ceiling and felt something I hadn't felt in years, a sense of possibility, of freedom. They thought they could cut me loose and I'd just disappear. But they'd forgotten something important. They'd forgotten that I was the one who'd built the relationships, the one who'd made the deals happen, the one who'd never let the clients down. They'd forgotten that I had spent 17 years learning how to make things work, how to survive, even when the odds were stacked against me. And now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was ready to fight. And I was going to win. I spent the next few days in a blur of planning and phone calls, running on a cocktail of adrenaline and quiet fury that made sleep feel like a luxury I couldn't afford. Carla watched me from across the table each night, her eyes tired but proud, her voice always calm when I started to doubt myself. "One step at a time, Thomas," she kept saying, and I clung to those words like a lifeline. By the end of the week, I had a name for my new venture, Keystone Logistics. It wasn't flashy, but it felt solid, like something you could trust. I'd rented a small office space on the edge of town, just a few rooms with peeling paint and ancient carpets that smelled faintly of dust. But to me, it felt like possibility, like the first real step I'd taken for myself in years. One morning, as I sat at my makeshift desk, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and a single battered laptop, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Richard's name, and I felt a cold jolt of satisfaction. I took a breath, then picked up. "Richard," I said calmly, even though my pulse was racing. "Thomas," he said, his voice tight, a forced politeness that didn't hide the edge beneath. "I've been hearing things." "I'm sure you have," I said. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment. "Word travels fast." He sighed, like this was all just a minor inconvenience. "We're both reasonable men, Thomas. I'm sure you understand that taking clients from us, it's not exactly professional." I laughed, the sound harsher than I intended. "Professional? After what you did? Don't talk to me about professionalism, Richard." His voice grew sharper. "You're putting us in a difficult position. Those accounts are company property." "No," I cut him off. "Those relationships are built on trust, Richard. And you lost that when you replaced me with your niece. The clients are following me because they trust me, not because of some piece of paper with your name on it." There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost picture him there in his corner office, his face red with frustration. "This isn't how I wanted things to go," he said finally, his tone softening in that manipulative way he'd perfected over the years. "We were a family, Thomas. You don't just walk away from family." I clenched my teeth, feeling a surge of anger so strong it made my hands tremble. "Family doesn't turn their back on you after 17 years, I said quietly. "Family doesn't replace you with someone who's never lifted a damn box or dealt with a midnight shipment crisis. Don't pretend you care about me now." He didn't respond right away, and for a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. But when he spoke again, his voice was cold and businesslike. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You'll never have the resources we do. You'll never compete." I took a deep breath, feeling a calm settle over me. "We'll see about that." And then I hung up, my hand shaking as I set the phone down. Carla was in the doorway, her arms folded, her eyes watching me. "How did it feel?" she asked softly. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Like I finally took back control." She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Then it was worth it." The calls from Richard didn't stop after that. Some days he tried threats, some days promises, offering me some phantom consulting role, dangling money and titles in front of me like bait. But each time, I just shook my head. I wasn't going back. Not ever. Meanwhile, Keystone Logistics started to come alive. Clients who had once been nothing more than names on a screen now called me directly, sharing frustrations they'd never trusted anyone else with. Ron was the first to sign his contract with me, his voice warm and full of relief. "I knew you'd do it, Thomas," he said. "You've always been the one who got it done." That one signature felt like the first crack in the dam. Others followed, small companies, big accounts, people who'd worked with me for years and knew exactly what I could do. Each new client felt like a vindication, A reminder that my worth wasn't tied to Richard's office or some corporate name. It was in me. My work, my integrity, my refusal to let anyone tell me I didn't matter. But it wasn't all easy. There were nights I lay awake, my mind racing with worries about cash flow and contracts, about how to keep everyone happy and every shipment on time. Carla would wrap her arm around me and whisper, "You're doing it, Thomas." One day at a time. Sometimes, I caught myself thinking about Emily, about how she'd sat in my office with that bright, oblivious smile and thought she could take my place. I didn't feel hate for her. She was just a pawn in Richard's game. But I did feel pity. She'd never know the satisfaction of building something real, something you could be proud of, something you didn't inherit because of your last name. One afternoon, as I finished another call with a new client, I sat back and looked around the tiny office. The cracked plaster, the flickering fluorescent light overhead, it didn't matter. Because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just surviving. I was winning, and I wasn't going to stop. In the weeks that followed, Keystone Logistics became more than just an idea, it became a force. Every morning, I'd unlock that battered door with a quiet sense of pride, breathing in the scent of fresh coffee and stale paint, and feel like I'd finally come home. The office was still rough around the edges, but I didn't care. My name was on the lease, and every invoice, every shipment, every satisfied client, it was mine. But with every client who signed on, the pressure mounted. Richard wasn't content to let me walk away clean. He unleashed a smear campaign so vicious it made my head spin. Rumors that I'd stolen data, that I'd lied to clients, that I was in over my head and would fold in 6 months. The first time I heard it, I felt like the ground had disappeared under my feet. Old colleagues called, their voices hushed, unsure what to believe. "You didn't really steal anything, did you?" One of them asked, her voice full of hesitation. "No," I said firmly. "I built these relationships. I never touched their files. This was mine, always mine." I could hear the relief in her voice, but also the fear. "He's making it sound bad, Thomas. Really bad." I hung up and sat in the silence of my office, the weight of it all pressing down like a vice. But then I'd look at the list of clients who'd come with me, see the contracts stacked on my desk, and remember why I was doing this. They could lie all they wanted. My work would speak for itself. Carla was my anchor through it all. On nights when I came home too exhausted to eat, she'd heat up leftovers and sit with me at the kitchen table, her hand resting on mine. "You're not the man they're trying to paint you as," she said softly. "You're the man who gave everything, and they're terrified of that." But it wasn't just Richard and his lies that I had to contend with. There were the small things. The little jabs from people who'd once called themselves my friends. A coworker I'd known for a decade crossed the street to avoid me at the grocery store. A former manager who'd praised me in meetings now pretended he didn't see me at all. Each one felt like a fresh betrayal, like the wound was being reopened again and again. Still, there were moments that kept me going. Like when Ron called late one night, his voice brimming with excitement. "Thomas, you're the best thing that's happened to our shipping in years," he said. "I don't care what they say, I trust you." Or when Carla surprised me with a sign for the front door, hand-painted in bright blue letters, "Keystone Logistics, built on trust." I stood there in the doorway, tracing each letter with my finger, and felt a swell of pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. But even as my business grew, I couldn't ignore the cost. The constant stress weighed on me. Every phone call, every rumor, every moment of doubt. There were nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake, wondering if I'd gambled everything I had, my reputation, my family's future, on a dream that might not survive. One rainy night, Carla found me out on the porch, staring at the darkened street. She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and leaned into me. "You're allowed to be scared," she said quietly. "But don't forget what you're fighting for." I took a shuddering breath, her warmth grounding me. "I'm not just fighting for me," I said. "I'm fighting for everyone who believes in me. For everyone who trusted me when no one else would." She nodded. "And that's why you'll win." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be that man who never faltered, never wavered. But the truth was, I was human. I'd been knocked down and humiliated, and some nights the weight of it all felt like it might crush me. But then the sun would rise, and I'd see the name on the door, and I'd remember. This was mine. They couldn't take it from me. They couldn't take my integrity, my determination, my refusal to let them define my worth. As I sat in my office one late afternoon, the soft hum of the phone in the background, I realized something. Richard could lie all he wanted. Emily could try to play at being the leader. But the clients, they knew me. They knew my word meant something. And in this business, that was everything. The fallout was far from over, and I knew the hardest days might still be ahead. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back. I was building something real, something no one could ever steal from me again. By the time summer faded into the cool edges of autumn, Keystone Logistics had grown from a half-baked idea into something that felt solid. My days blurred together in a flurry of phone calls and shipments. But there was a steady rhythm to it all, a calm certainty that replaced the panic I'd once felt in the quiet of the night. My name was on the invoices, my signature on the contracts, and with every client who came to me, I felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I'd almost forgotten. But it wasn't just about business. It was about who I'd become in the wake of betrayal. Some nights, I'd find myself sitting in my office long after everyone had gone home, the glow of the desk lamp casting shadows on the walls, and I'd think about those 17 years I'd given to Richard. About all the hours I'd traded, the birthdays I'd missed, the weekends I'd sacrificed in the name of loyalty. And I'd wonder, was it all a waste? Then I'd remember the look in Carla's eyes when I first told her my plan. The way she'd held me in the kitchen and said, "You're not a man who quits, Thomas." I'd remember the voices of the clients who had followed me without question, who saw past the rumors and the lies because they knew me, knew my heart. I thought about Richard, too. About how he looked at me in that conference room, his eyes already drifting to Emily, as if I was nothing more than a line on a budget report. I thought about Emily, all bright smiles and eager plans, and how she'd never understand the price of loyalty because she'd never earned it herself. The fallout from Richard's campaign of lies never fully stopped. There were always whispers, always someone eager to repeat the worst of it. But I learned to let the noise wash over me. The clients I cared about, the ones who'd shared midnight phone calls and last-minute emergencies with me, they knew the truth. They knew I'd built something real, something honest. And that was enough. One evening, as the last rays of sun slipped through the blinds, Carla came to the office with dinner in a paper bag, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary filling the small space. We sat together at the dented desk, the two of us eating in the quiet, and I found myself talking about everything I'd been too busy to say. "You know," I said, tracing a crack in the old wood with my fingertip, "for the longest time, I thought my loyalty was my strength. But now, I think it was my weakness too." She watched me, her eyes soft and steady. "It was both, Thomas. And that's okay." I let out a slow breath. I was so sure that if I just worked hard enough, they'd see me, really see me. But they never did. And I don't think they ever would have. She reached across the table and took my hand, her thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You don't need their validation anymore. You've got your own." I looked around at the worn carpet, the battered desk, the single potted plant in the corner that Carla had brought in to brighten the place up. And I realized she was right. This was mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and no one could take it from me. I'd thought that betrayal would break me, that losing everything I'd worked for would leave me hollow and bitter. But sitting there in that small office, with Carla's hand in mine and the quiet hum of the city outside, I felt something else. Peace. Because I hadn't just survived, I'd rebuilt. I'd found a way to turn my pain into something new, something better. I knew there would always be challenges. Business was never easy, and trust was something you earned over and over again. But I also knew that I wouldn't let anyone, boss, family, or friend, tell me who I was or what I deserved ever again. As Carla and I locked up the office and stepped out into the cool night, I paused to look back at the sign she'd painted, "Keystone Logistics, built on trust." The letters gleamed faintly in the lamplight, and I felt a surge of quiet pride. This was the life I'd chosen. My boundaries were mine now, firm and unwavering. My loyalty would never again be for sale to those who didn't earn it. And as I walked down the darkened street, Carla's hand warm in mine, I knew, without a doubt, I had finally come home to myself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story in our journey through the trials and triumphs of family drama. Your support helps keep these stories alive. See you soon in the next one.